Hello and welcome to Focus on Africa from BBC News. We start in the UK, where new figures released today show that net migration, the difference between the number of people coming to live in the UK and the number leaving, hit a record high in 2022. That figure rose to 606,000 last year, driven by people from non-EU countries arriving for work and study following the pandemic. Now that's up from 488,000 in 2021. Why does this matter? Well, this all goes back to yesterday's announcement and those changes to the visa rules for students and their dependents. Let me break it down for you. The top three countries for study visas are actually India, China, and then Nigeria. Nigerian nationals showed the largest percentage increase. That went up 83%. So how does that actually break down by dependents? Well, almost a quarter of all study-related visas were for dependents of students, climbing from 15 to 24% between March 2022 and March 2023. And of those, around 73% were visas issued to dependents of two nationalities, Indian and Nigerian. But it was Nigeria that had actually had the highest number of dependents. Now that actual figure is nearly 67,000, an increase of 27,000 during that same period. So you can see now why the UK government is starting to target dependents of students. Those are the key figures. So I'm joined now by our correspondent in Lagos, Mayeni Jones. And since yesterday's announcement then, Mayeni, there is going to be some concern, isn't there? I mean, the main issue is research courses. Those dependents can come. What reaction has there been on the ground where you are?
I think the main reaction has been confusion. Many Nigerians don't really understand the rationale behind the decision, particularly because if you're on a student visa in the UK, you're not entitled to access to public funds. You have to pay a surcharge for yourself and your dependents to use the NHS. So you're basically not much of a drain on public resources. You're just paying in international student fees that can be as high as £15,000 a year and more without taking much out. So lots of confusion here with people not understanding why students are being targeted by this.
Okay, so Mayeni, just break it down for us. Why do Nigerians choose the UK over the rest of the world, other universities?
I think the UK, has really strong historical ties with Nigeria. It's also relatively easy to get to. It's only a 6-hour flight from Lagos, where I am, to London. Lots of Nigerians have relatives. There's a long history of immigration by Nigerians to the UK. So if you want to relocate there, it's kind of easy for you to find your footing, maybe find somewhere to live, somebody that can help you out. There's thriving communities in major cities like London, but also Birmingham, Manchester. So it feels very comfortable for a lot of Nigerians, and also many of them, particularly, affluent Nigerians, middle-class Nigerians, they value British universities. They think they're some of the best in the world. So that's why a lot of them have been choosing the UK to go and work and study.
Has there been anything, I mean, we hear so much, don't we, Mayeni, about the brain drain. Is that something that has affected Nigeria at all?
Yeah, it's been a huge concern, particularly when it comes to medical staff over the last year. The Nigerian Medical Association has, repeatedly issued interviews to local media saying that brain drain is the real issue. They're seeing thousands of doctors and other medical professionals leaving the country. The National Association of Midwives and Nurses say that its members leave the country on a weekly basis, and that last year they lost 50,000 nurses and midwives who relocated abroad. So it's a huge problem. It's been trending, this idea of japaing, which is this Yoruba word that means to flee, to leave. It's been trending for over a year now on social media because lots of young people, particularly professionals, just find it too hard to live in Nigeria at the moment. Inflation's hard, it's high, unemployment is high, they're really struggling to make ends meet. So they think that by relocating abroad, either to study, to get a qualification, they can skill up and find a better job, or move abroad to work.
Okay, so if the option of the UK is no longer there, unless, of course, you are studying and going on to do further research, which does allow you to enter the UK, where else could Nigerians go to study abroad?
Yeah, I think, this change of policy obviously won't affect those without dependents, but if you have dependents, particularly children, and this could predominantly affect female students, I think they might start looking at countries further afield that weren't necessarily their first choice, but are more openly courting international students, places like Canada. There's been mention, anecdotally from people I know of maybe looking into places like Australia, Germany. So I think increasingly young Nigerians are aware of the fact that if you're educated, particularly in areas like engineering, medicine, IT, your skills are really needed elsewhere in the world. And I think a lot of people's reaction to the decision by the government to stop students with dependents from bringing dependents to the country has been, okay, well, maybe I need to think about studying somewhere else.
Okay, Mayani Jones, thank you very much for that update. So that's the reaction in Nigeria. Let's talk now to a gentleman called Toyib Abdijaliil, who is a career coach and actually gives advice to prospective students coming to the UK. Toyib, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on and talking to us here on Focus on Africa. First off, since the announcement yesterday and then those figures today, what sort of reaction are you getting from some of the students that you do speak to?
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me. It is panic, and part of that is the information came suddenly. I was speaking to about 100 students yesterday, and the information hasn't gone across enough, and people have different fears. There's anxiety. They don't understand what is going on, and the information I have been passing around, and a couple of others like us, is to calm down, read through the government directive. It doesn't affect you that you are here now, because some people have been spreading information like, oh, does it affect us? What about our dependents? What happens to them? So the information we are trying to pass across is calm down, read through the directives, understand what is going on, and then you can act. You can act further from there.
So Toyib, what do you understand then by this change? What are the key pointers that people should be paying attention to?
The key pointers is that from January 2024, as the statement on the government website says, students that are, previously used to be undergraduate students are not allowed to come with dependents. So you have to be studying masters and above. So, but from January 2024, master students will not be allowed to bring their dependents. So you have to be doing a research program, a PhD, to be able to come to the UK with dependents. But we must also understand, as your reporter was saying earlier, dependents to students have no recourse to public funds. In fact, before you actually apply to study here in the UK and bring your dependents, they have to pay the NHS surcharge, like they have to pay an amount upfront, that they may not even use. They have to pay that amount upfront, and they have to show that the dependent will be well catered for, if it's like a child or something. And the other person that is coming, maybe like a partner, that person can work and that person will pay tax. And the bottom line is they have no recourse to public funds.
Because I suppose there is this misguided thought and thinking that it becomes a pressure on the social system here in the UK, isn't it?
Yes, and that is where we have to have the balance in conversation, because it is clearly written on the visas that the students get that they have no recourse to public funds. And whilst they apply, like I said earlier, they've paid their visa fees, they've paid an NHS surcharge well in advance before they even step their foot into the country. Okay. So, yes.
Sorry, Toyib, I just want to get one more question with you. What are the preferred subjects then for Nigerians coming to study in the UK? And in terms of a PhD, does it matter whether it's a STEM subject or is it just research? Because that's what I can't get my head around.
I think the information coming out and the statement released hasn't been very, very clear what the research subjects would be. But as your reporter was saying earlier, a British education has been very, very valuable to a lot of us that has come from Africa. You know, we become so valuable, we can decide to work here, we can decide to work in any other part of the world. And that is part of the government strategy when they did the International Education Strategy Report in 2019, that they want, you know, post-Brexit, post-COVID, they want 600,000 international students to come here annually to study. And they pay around £15,000 in tuition fees. That is a lot of money coming into the system.
Okay, so it actually pays, migration pays. Toye Abdijaliil Odoladoon, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ukesha. Thank you so much for having me.